My name is Virgil, and I'm going to tell you about a series of events that happened to me over the last couple months. The reason for this is because I feel like I don't have much time left, and I want people to know what's happened to me. You see, I never believed in the idea that there was life on other planets. I always thought that, if there were, they would surely visit us, either out of curiosity or just the need to destroy something. This all started back in November when I was a senior in college. I wasn't exactly a popular student. The only people who I could consider my friends were a freshman named Cody and another senior named Yuri. Cody has always been a really shy person. He has pretty poor social skills, and he sort of just latched onto me. I didn't really mind because I know what it's like to be shy. Yuri, on the other hand, is sort of the opposite of Cody. He's a social butterfly, for lack of a better word. He wants to be friends with everyone he meets, which kind of leads to him annoying people because he never really stops trying. It was a pretty normal day. I went to my classes and hung out with Cody and Yuri. We were talking in the halls when I found a pamphlet on the wall. It was an advertisement for a program that needed volunteers for a special project. It said that you would earn extra credit for participating and be paid $500. What the project wasn't described in the pamphlet, but it had me interested nonetheless. A little extra credit and some money didn't sound bad, so I looked at the location. It was in a part of the school that I never heard of before. My college wasn't huge and went by zones. Zone 1 was where the dorms were. Zone 2 was for classes, and Zone 3 was where everyone went to eat lunch. The pamphlet said Zone 4, which I never knew existed. A couple hours later, I tried to look up Zone 4 in my college, and I managed to find an old map in the library that mentioned the area. It said that Zone 4 was about a mile out from my college, which was strange. Why did they add this area so far away from the campus? I didn't think much about it, so I got ready and got on my bike. It was about 5 p.m. when I reached the area. It didn't really look like a college campus. It looked more like a lab of some sort. It was a relatively large building with a giant antenna on the top. There was a car parked out front, and 3 people standing by the entrance. One was a woman who looked pretty short. She had long black hair and green eyes, and seemed pretty nervous. The second was a man who was the tallest of all of us. He had short brown hair and had blue eyes and a slim figure. And finally, there was another guy. He was around my height and was bald. He was the strangest of the group. He had gray eyes and looked at the other 2 with a suspicious look, it seemed. Like he didn't trust anyone. He stood away from the others and looked at me with a dead expression on his face. I got off my bike and walked to the 2 and introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Lily," the woman said in a nervous tone. She didn't look at me when she talked. Her voice was really soothing. "Hey, I'm Alex," the tall man said while shaking my hand. He seemed like a decent person and he had a confident vibe to him. I asked about the bald guy and Alex told me that his name is Quinn and not to pay any attention to him. He keeps to himself mostly and he hasn't said a word to anyone. About 5 minutes pass and someone opens the door and tells us to come in. We all walked in and looked around. The first floor was the reception area. It was a somewhat ran-down looking area with a desk and an old-looking computer on top. The walls were a depressing gray and the floors were white tiles. There were no windows except for the door, and the lights weren't very bright. The person who told us to come in was the secretary. She was a tall woman with curly blonde hair and a somewhat uneasy smile. It was almost like she was hiding something. She told us in a chipper voice that the head of the project would be here shortly and to wait here. We all nodded our heads and waited about 15 minutes. There was a somewhat disturbing aura to this whole thing. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. The head finally arrived and we were greeted by a short man in a lab coat. He looked to be in his mid-40s and had a black beard. His eyes were piercing and he was missing a hand. "Hello, my name is Dr. Popowitz," he said in a cheerful tone. His voice was deep and rough. "Thank you all for participating in Project Orion. The purpose of this project is to prove that we are not alone in the universe, that somewhere deep within this solar system, there is a civilization of beings who we will welcome with open arms." He was really passionate about what he just said. We all sort of looked at him with confusion. Now, I know that I probably seem, well, crazy, but I assure you, I'm not. He sounded a little nervous when he said that. "Anyways, please follow me and I'll give you all a tour." We all looked at each other and I gave a shrug. We then proceeded to follow the doctor. He showed us around the complex, telling us about the various rooms and gave a little insight into his life. He had been looking for signs of extraterrestrial life for over 25 years, and he believes he finally might be onto something and he's going to need the help. Of course, I thought that this guy was out of his mind, but hey, a little money couldn't hurt. After showing us around, he finally stopped in a large room. There were monitors everywhere, and some kind of radio it looked like in the center of the room. "And this is where you'll be helping me. It's pretty easy work. You all will be watching these monitors for 3 days. And if you see or hear anything, then speak into the intercom here." He points to the intercom on the wall. Now, I should mention that none of you are allowed to expose the purpose of this project. I've worked too hard to get to where I am now, and I can't have anyone finding out what this is. We all nodded and he showed us to our respective monitors. He told us what each button does and then proceeded to walk off. I looked around and everyone was doing their job, except for Quinn. He kept looking at me. Actually, now that I think of it, I don't think he ever stopped looking at me. I felt really uneasy and I tried to ignore him and looked at my monitor. There was nothing but stars and distant planets. It was rather peaceful, honestly. After a few hours, we heard Dr. Popowitz speak through a speaker.
"You may all go home. Please return tomorrow at 6 p.m.
I groaned and got up and walked out of the room. I checked my phone and it was 1 a.m. I was getting pretty tired, so I began to go back to my dorm. As I was walking out, I saw Quinn staring at me again. I got annoyed and asked him why he won't stop looking at me. He didn't reply. He just kept looking. For a second, I could have sworn his eyes changed colors. I got fed up and walked out of the building. Nothing happened on the second day. It was the final day when it actually happened. I still remember the exact date and time. November 30th at 11:21 p.m. I was looking at my monitor when suddenly a weird noise started up. It was garbled. We all looked around and realized the radio was on. It seems like it picked up some kind of transmission. My eyes widened and I ran to the intercom and told the doctor we think we found something. In mere seconds he dashed into the room and I explained what happened. He ran to the radio and began frantically saying,
"Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?"
After a few attempts, someone or something spoke.
"Why have you contacted us?"
The voice was deep and unsettling.
I don't mean any harm. My name is Dr. Popowitz, and I'm from the planet Earth. We wanted to prove that we weren't alone in the universe."
The doctor seemed really excited. I couldn't believe that we actually made contact with other life. Everything I thought was a lie. I felt excitement and fear.
"Earth, that loathsome little planet."
The voice replied.
"Yes, for so many years I've waited for this moment. Please, may we see what you look like?"
The doctor was in a state of pure bliss. After a few seconds of silence, the monitors went black. They came back on shortly after, and that's when we saw them. We looked in fear as we saw the faces of the beings we made contact with. They had long slim bodies and their heads were unnaturally round and smooth. Their eyes were a deep shade of red, It was almost hypnotizing. They had no mouth, and yet they could speak. Their skin was like baby blue, and they had claws for hands. I felt a pit in my stomach and started to question if this was the right thing to do. I looked at the others, and they all shared the same look as me, except for Popowitz and Quinn. They had a look of excitement, as if this was what they wanted. The doctor starts laughing like an insane man, then turns to us. "All my work has finally paid off. They all called me insane, those morons. Now I have proved that we aren't alone." He could barely contain his joy. Suddenly, the building started shaking, and the creature said,
"Your curiosity will be your undoing."
A portal on the roof started to open, and soon after, one of those things landed on the floor. He towered over all of us and just stared. Popowitz's expression went from joy to pure fear in an instant. "What do you mean?" he asked. The creature turned around and looked at him. Then he picked the doctor up without actually touching him. "What are you doing? Put me down!" he demanded, but the creature wouldn't listen. We all watched as the creature slammed the doctor into the wall several times with incredible force. All we could hear was the sounds of bones being crushed and drywall cracking. He finally tosses the doctor into the monitors. They all crackle and glass flies everywhere. We all gasped, and I began to shake. I tried to run, but my body was frozen. It was as if that monster had kept us from being able to run. That being looked over at Quinn and walked to him. He still had a smile on his face, and he finally spoke. "It's about time." His voice has an echo to it, and his body began to change into his true form. "You wouldn't believe how long I've been here," Quinn said as he looked at us. "The good doctor finally got the proof he wanted. Too bad he won't live to tell it, and neither will any of you." Every fiber of my being wanted to run. I looked over to Lily and Alex. They were petrified. Lily began to sob, and Alex said, "You bastards! Why are you doing this?" Quinn looked at him and explained. "Simple, really. I crashed here 5 years ago and needed to get back. However, my transmitter was broken, so I had no way to get back or contact my people. So I took some human's body and wandered around this pitiful planet until I finally found the late doctor. He was obsessed with finding extraterrestrial life, so I tricked him into doing all of this, and he outlived his usefulness. I leave no loose ends." Alex clenched his fist and wanted to attack Quinn and the other being. He ran towards them, but before he could even land a finger on one of them, they grabbed him and began to slowly rip him apart. Lily began screaming as she ran out of the room. I followed her. All we heard was the sounds of screaming and flesh being ripped apart. The lights went out, and we were left in total darkness. Lily was panicking, and I tried to calm her down. Those things, they just killed them without a second thought." Lily was on the verge of hypoventilating, and I couldn't blame her. I was trying to control my fear, but it was getting harder every second. I looked past Lily's shoulder, and I saw 2 pairs of red eyes. "Oh God, Lily, we need to run now," I told her as I grabbed her hand and pulled her with me. I didn't know where I was going, but I was in pure survival mode, in what felt like an endless maze of corridors. But every second I ran, the closer those things felt to me. After what felt like an eternity, I saw an elevator light, and I told Lily to follow me, and we ran to the elevator and pressed the button as fast as we could. Come on, hurry up! I was breathing heavily, and so was Lily. The elevator finally arrived, and we ran in. However, as the door was about to close, one of the creatures grabbed Lily and pulled her out. All I heard was her screaming as the door closed, and it took me to the first floor. I tried to take a moment to calm myself, but I couldn't. I thought I was going to die here, that they would be on the first floor, waiting for me. The elevator pinged, and the door slowly opened. I was glad to see the exit sign above the front door. I ran as fast as I could to the exit, and with all my strength, I slammed the door open and fell onto the ground. I wasn't even thinking. I just ran and ran and ran. I even left my bike. I somehow managed to escape from there. But I was the only one, the sole survivor. After what felt like forever, I finally made it to my dorm. As soon as I opened the door, I passed out and didn't wake up for several hours. When I did wake up, I was in the nurse's office. Cody and Yuri were by my side, and I never felt so glad to see them. They asked me what happened, and I told them what happened. About Popowitz, the creatures, Lily, and Alex. They thought I was crazy, but I told them I'm telling the truth and that I would even show them after I was better. After I was better, I told them I would show them Zone 4, and we got into Yuri's car and drove there. What I saw shocked me. The building was gone. There was no trace of it. Just trees. They asked if I got the right location, and I told them I know this is where Zone 4 was. It was like there was never anything there at all. Yuri told me I must have just imagined it or something. And we drove back to my college. No one believed me, but I know what I saw. Weeks went by, and I still had nightmares about what happened. I could still see the faces of those things. I could still hear the screams. I even heard them taunting me. Their voices echoed in my mind. I felt like I was going to go insane. I finally had enough, and I wanted to just get away from everything. So I decided to drop out of college and just move away. And surprisingly, it worked. I didn't have the nightmares or anything. I didn't even hear their voices. Until a couple days ago, that is. I mentioned earlier that the reason I'm writing this was because I felt like I didn't have much time left until they found me. Well, they did. I started hearing the voices again, and I saw flashes of me dying in various gruesome ways. I should have known there would be no escape. Even as I type this out, I can hear their voices echo in my head. Believe me or not, it doesn't matter anymore. I'll see you soon, Quinn.